Alright, hey y'all, this is Corvus, and we're about to start the first episode into my playthrough of Amy's story from Soul Calibur 6. To give a little bit of context about why I'm doing this, because of the nature of Soul Calibur's story, it's very visual novel-ish. Especially compared to other fighting games, which is rough to say the least, because Soul Calibur is not known for superb storytelling. Right. I think that's kind of what makes Amy and her father Raphael special in my eyes, at least. Because for some reason, even though they're relatively minor characters in the lore and grand scheme of things, within the wider context of the Soul Calibur multiverse, I guess it's not really a multiverse, even if there's divergent timelines, but whatever, I digress. They're really unique in that I think they're really well written, especially for fighting game characters. When fighting game, fighting games just as a genre, notoriously have kind of basic and mid characterization and lore and plot at best. Like the best you have is Mortal Kombat. Then I'm not even gonna count Injustice because that's based off of DC, which, yeah, whatever. I might get torn apart for this down in the comments, which is fine. I'm not exactly an expert on fighting games or anything, so I probably deserve that. But yeah, Amy is one of my favorite video game characters of all time, point blank period. It ain't no question. So yeah, even though there's not really a market for this, I'm just gonna go ahead and do it anyway. And when you really think about it, there's really not a market for any of the content on my channel, I don't really think. If the mediocre views are anything to go by, it's not, yeah. No one's watching my shit, so I'm just kind of doing what I want to do. And hoping I do eventually catch the eye of someone and I entertain y'all with my antics. You know, whatever. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Oh, I should say that this isn't going to be my first reaction to the story. It's going to be more of a revisitation, because I have played through the game before. It's it was a long time ago, so that there may be finer details that I may have either missed or completely forgot about. So yeah. Raphael, we're gonna get to you. We're gonna get to you. Alright, okay. Let's start at the beginning. 1583 AD. Alright. Amy's Story Chapter 1, The Perfect World. Let's get right into it.
The streets of the French colonial empire ran red with blood as nobles waged their ceaseless feuds. But such power and politics were far removed from a young girl who knew only the slums of Rouen. Growing up surrounded by crime, depravity, and violence, she learned at a young age how to look out for herself and survive. She built walls around herself until her world consisted of nothing more than a single chair. That is, until one fateful day.
There. Now I can eat for a few days at least.
Check it out. Red's wandering around on her own again.
That girl. It pisses me off how she ignores us.
Relax, she'll turn up face down in a gutter soon enough. What do you say to a little wager on when that'll be?
Sounds fun. You're on.
Always the same scum everywhere. It's not like I'm alive because I want to be. Soldiers. They're armed. 3, 4. There's someone over here.
A pauper's daughter?
I heard something over here!
No. This back alley can't be my end.
You, child! A strange noble passed through here, didn't he? Tell me where he went!
Okay. Soldiers always act so high and mighty and annoying. No reason to help such self-important buffoons. He went over there and hid behind the horse cart.
The coward! After him! He should still be nearby!
What?
They're gone now.
Indeed. You saved me.
Nah, I just wanted to annoy them.
Still, I'm glad. So, tell me your name.
My name? I'm Red. Wait. Amy?
Amy. Amy.
You're silly. Why cry when you're safe? Raphael. That's what he called himself. I don't know why I decided to go with him, but I did. It was pure chance I was there when those soldiers came, and I only lied to annoy them. And yet, Raphael wanted to give me a better future. But hope only leads to disappointment. I've learned that by now.
Okay, so I just want to touch on what we saw just now. I would really like to highlight the voice acting. Like the voice acting throughout Amy's story, you'll notice, I hope you'll notice, is superb, right? Like even within just that little bit of dialogue that we got, that little scene, you could hear the very realistic idea that children are very sophisticated human beings. Like they have genuine complex thoughts that go on inside their heads, right? But they can't necessarily properly articulate those thoughts into actual vocal speech. And you really hear that with Amy, really showing her age and her intelligence. Like you could hear the deeper voice inside her head. Not too much deeper, but it's still there. As compared to when she spoke, she sounded like a child, like a young girl, maybe 7 or 8. If that, right? And then in the word choice, too, she calls the guards in her head self-important buffoons, right? That's not the vocabulary of a child, let alone a child of her age, or a, an impoverished orphan with no education, especially back then. Right? Especially back in the late 1500s, she's not going to have that kind of vocabulary. So you can tell just based off of that word choice in the script that portrays her intelligence and a certain level of maturity, I guess, in her thought processes. Whereas when she talks to Raphael and her voice comes out, she's still very much a child, right? There's the idea that, oh, you're silly. Which, not to say that silly is a silly childlike word, but kind of is, especially next to self-important buffoon. Like, the script could have said, you're strange, or you're odd, you're weird. Which, all of those would have fit for that situation. But a child would have gone with silly. Which, silly could fit there too, but still, maybe it's a reach, but whatever. And when she tells Raphael her name, Amy, it's shy, it's bashful. She was so sure of herself when she was calling him silly for crying when he was safe. But when she has to reveal personal information like her name, she goes shy. It's almost bashful. Embarrassed even. Like maybe she was embarrassed that she was really initially going to call herself Red instead of her actual name. Which, that alone, the idea that she momentarily forgot that her name was Amy, or rather, her first initial, gut thought would have been to go with Red, really shows just how long she's been alone. It's possible her mother either died from childbirth, or her parents sold her off, or abandoned her, immediately after she was born. Or a couple years prior to when we meet her. 'Cause that's a common thing. When you look at people who've been alone for so long to the point where no one really talks to them, it becomes something where if you don't hear your own name or someone calling you by your own name for a long time, you're either going to go by the nickname that they call you. For example, a lot of people, most people call, my older sister, for example, her name is Dominique. But most people, including people in our family, will call her Nikki. So, her gut reaction, if someone were to ask her name, would probably be Nikki. She probably wouldn't say Dominique unless it's for a job application or something formal like that. So, to kind of hear that bit of characterization in the dialogue is crazy. Right, that kind of subtle genius shit, I love it. Now, maybe I'm giving it a lot more credit than it deserves. Because when you're looking at games like Final Fantasy or more story-oriented games like that, like more RPG games. RPG games? Come on now, Corvus. They're probably gonna be a lot more sophisticated, more nuanced dialogue, and a lot higher end voice acting quality. Just by virtue of placing more emphasis on it. And this is by no means the standard for Soul Calibur. Amy is very much an exception when it comes to this level of effort. Which is crazy, which is one of the reasons I think I'm so drawn to her. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch on that. You're going to hear a bit more of that and hear how she's matured over the course of being with Raphael. Like you'll see here in chapter 2, you'll see here there's been a 3-year time skip. And you're really gonna hear that progression, and you're going to see it in how she appears, right? You're gonna see it in her physical features, you're gonna see it in how she carries herself. Although you'll also see that the 3 years isn't really enough to completely change her. She's still gonna have that orphan, that street kid kind of shit in her, right? Yeah, you're gonna see that in chapter 2, the changing of seasons. Let's see here. Was their meeting really mere chance? After Amy saved Raphael's life, the Sorrel family's former patriarch, in turn, brought her with him out of the slums. The two spent years dodging the my dyslexia is going crazy right now, and I'm way too far away from the screen. The fires of war. The two spent years dodging the fires of war and their pursuers before arriving in a provincial city in southern France. There, Lord Dumas appointed Raphael to his right hand in recognition of his talent, and Amy became Raphael's daughter. Note the quotations there. That's interesting. She was raised as a noble and trained in the art of swordplay. That's interesting that daughter is in quotations there. Because if you know almost anything about European nobility, especially around this era of history, there's a lot of emphasis on titles, names, and bloodlines. That's really that's the big three. In terms of attributes that make up the wide array of, it's really like the holy grail of what you're looking for in nobility, and to see who's worth being noble or not. That probably didn't make any sense. It made sense in my head before it came out, but anyway, point is, they take shit like that very seriously. And for Amy to go into not only be under the protection of, but live with Raphael, but to also legally get her name, legally take on the name of Sorrel, so she is now legally Amy Sorrel. is a really big fucking deal. Like that's huge, right? So the daughter in quotations kind of like implies that, oh, she's not really his daughter. And it's like, no shit. Just if you paid any attention at all in chapter 1, that the entire plot of chapter 1 is just Amy and Raphael meeting for the first time. Like, anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together can figure it out that no shit, Amy's not his real fucking daughter. Like, they're not biologically related in any capacity outside of them both being French. Which, Amy might not even be naturally French, like ethnically. But that's a whole different topic in and of itself. So it makes me wonder if there's not like an actual legal adoption system back then. So I'm gonna have to look into that. Because I've never actually taken the time to consider and think about just how old the idea of legal adoption is. Right? I guess let's get right into it. This is probably going to be the last one, because there's a fair bit to talk about with these that I'd like to touch on. I don't want this to run too long. I've got other shit I've got to take care of today, so yeah. Without further ado, Amy Chapter 2, The Changing of Seasons.
That's enough for today. You've become far more skilled than I ever imagined. Amy, you've a natural talent, not just for the sword, but for the battle.
And yet, you still hold back.
Agility, awareness, intuition. These are your strengths. However, you still favor your left leg, albeit unconsciously, and this limits your movements. You must come to grips with that incurable wound of yours. And you've one other great fault. Care to know what it is?
I'm all ears. Let's hear it.
You forget you are my daughter here. You should refer to me as father or lord. It is unseemly for a noble to disrespect her father.
Dummy. Never mind.
Very well. A lesson for another time, perhaps. Now, I must be off to patrol the region and speak to some indolent wolf catchers. I would hate to displease our master of the moment, Lord Dumas. I presume you can return to the mansion on your own. You needn't worry. As long as we're hiding out here, we should be safe from the Bird of Passage's assassins.
It doesn't really matter to me where we are. My weakness, my injury, that day.
Don't be foolish. Stealing the Holy Stone?
You must know the truth by now. The Aval organization has betrayed the Lady of the Lake.
It's Lord Dumas. But who's the other guy?
How do you know of that?
Your knowledge of their betrayal is why you left them, is it not? You are a devious man, Lord Dumas. If there was someone you wished me to meet, you should have just said so.
What nonsense do you speak now?
Wouldn't you agree? Do you always lurk behind doors and eavesdrop, young lady?
Amy, is that you? My apologies, Lord Aswell. This young noblewoman is a guest staying in my hall. She is still new here and must have gotten lost.
I'd expect nothing less, Lord Dumas. You are trying to test me. The light of emotion burns dim in her. Her caution rivals that of beasts, and she does not hide her fangs. This girl is no noble woman.
She isn't? But then...
Ah, wisdom dimmed by age is a beautiful, exquisitely human sight. My business here is finished. My thanks in advance for your support of the qualifiers, Lord Dumas. Thank you, little lady. You have made this visit a delight. Those who seek stasis must never cease their step. Cover yourself with the veil of refinement, young lady. Or perhaps I should say, young Amy.
Alright, so, yeah, even though there was relatively little going on in there that has to do with Amy specifically, or even Raphael for that matter, there's still the idea that there's still this idea of characterization there, right? Like, we got a lot of we've got a lot of character development for Raphael in here. Like, it was like the first chapter was all about characterizing Amy and seeing what she's about as a person as we're introduced to her. Like, her, like, the general vibe of her character doesn't really change. She, much like most any other person, is going to have a general demeanor about her, a general philosophy that's going to carry with her throughout her entire life, right? Even if the finer details and the nuances change and evolve with time as she matures and experiences new things and gets herself into different situations and meets different people. That base fundamental layer will always still be there, right? But then with Raphael, we didn't really get to see him a whole lot. We did get a glimpse into kind of what he's about too, but not nearly as much as Amy, which his script and his voice actor did a phenomenal job in both of these chapters, especially I think the first one, because for so little dialogue we got from him, like for as little as that was, it still did a good job to kind of paint this picture of some sort of criminal, but a well-refined man on the run. Like his use of the word pauper, and the tone of voice his voice actor portrays as he says that. And it's not necessarily coming from contempt of a pauper, it's more so, what the fuck are you doing here? Kind of thing. So we get the sense that, yes, he is of higher birth, or at the very least higher status, than anyone else on the scene. Whether it be those two nameless thugs that were talking shit about Amy, or Amy herself being the orphan, or the soldiers. Not knights, mind you, but soldiers. He's obviously the highest on the social ladder there, despite even being a criminal. But then we get that he doesn't really hold a lot of contempt for the poor, the lower echelon in society. Hence why he's grateful to Amy. That's a young child who, for all intents and purposes, all she did was, even though she saved his life, which retroactively is a really, really cool characterization for Raphael, because he should have been able to take them. Like, if he fought his hardest, even if he didn't successfully kill all of them, he could have gotten away from them. Maybe not unscathed, but he would still be alive. I don't think he would have died if he actually had to throw down. But that shows that he didn't want to. Like, he didn't want to have to fight him if he didn't have to. Or it may have shown that back then he was naive enough to be like, alright, I won't raise a hand to the law, so if they want to strike me down, they're gonna have to catch me. Not beat me in a fight, but catch me. Because then, at that point, I've lost this game of cat and mouse. Which, that's gonna be a whole thing for him. And then, that's just still talking about chapter 1. We go into chapter 2, and we see that he's starting to treat Amy as if she really were his own flesh and blood daughter. Like, you can tell that he loves her. You can kind of see an affectionate side to Amy as well. Calling him a dummy. When she knows the word buffoon, and if it was really that deep to her, she probably would have called him that. Because as, what the fuck was his name? Aswell points out, she really is still very much that street kid. Yeah, she's been polished. Is a lot cleaner, looks a lot better, has the drip, you know what I'm saying? She's got the sauce of nobility about her now. This refined air of elegance. Although you could argue she had that before, but that's with prior information that chapter 1 doesn't really tell us a whole lot about. Without reaching and going into theorizing territory. But yeah, all in all, another really strong chapter. No combat, no gameplay, which I think this game really shines in its characterization in the actual gameplay itself, which I will definitely be talking about when we actually do get to fight, which is probably going to be here in chapter 3. But I think this is where I'm going to end it for today. So thank y'all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. I've been Corvus, and you've been you, and we out here.